This is going to be a video on how to set up servo control for these 4 different types of drones. This video is just going to be going over servo control and nothing else. Eventually I'll make a video on how to assemble each of these drones by itself. This one is a linear servo that I have set up to a dropper. It's toggled with this button. There's a pin that pulls back when you press the button, and that releases the payload. This servo is connected to a gear, and that gear turns this rubber band shooter. Install the barrel. And now you can press the button, and that turns the gear, and that shoots rubber bands. And both of these use that same mechanism. We're going to be using Betaflight to configure the servo. This works for a variety of different flight controllers. If you want to know how to wire the servo, then just look up the flight controller that you want to use on the manufacturer's website. We're going to be repurposing the LED pad to act as a servo. And this is the diagram right here. This is the LED pad. So when you plug in your servo, you're going to be connected the red wire here. The black or brown wire is going to be the ground. And the yellow or white wire is going to be LED. And for Flywoo, the LED pad is here, ground is here, and 5V is here. If you're running a DJI Air unit, then I recommend disconnecting it. That way it doesn't overheat. That way you only have to manage the heat for the flight controller itself, because this thing does get hot. Alright, now back to Betaflight. Plug that in. Beta FPV's flight controllers actually can power the servo just from the USB connector. They don't need the battery to be plugged in. But this is not the same for Flywoo's flight controller. You do actually need battery power in order to engage the servo. So just be mindful of that when you go to test it. But for Beta FPV, the USB power is enough. If your drone doesn't show up, then go to select device, can't find USB device, and it should give you the option to force the connection to the drone. If it still doesn't connect, then it's something wrong with your drivers, or maybe your flight controller isn't up to date. Go to SLI, type in resource, and these are all your resources. And you want to look for the resource LED strip. And as you can see, LED strip is not here. These say LED, but these are not what you want. These are these are for the 2 notification LEDs that are currently blinking on the flight controller. If LED strip doesn't show up, then you're going to need to update the firmware on your drone. If you have the correct firmware, then when you plug your drone in, you should see LED strip right here. Go to firmware, wait for that to boot, auto detect your board, click the most current version, CRSF, digital, assuming you're using a digital controller. Make sure D-Shot is selected. Sometimes it doesn't, so you just want to make sure of that. And LED strip and servos. These are both very important. Otherwise, the correct options to configure the servo will not show up in Betaflight. And then load firmware, and then just go through the flash process like you normally would. Make sure you create a backup. After you flash your firmware, that's going to be a blank installation. So you want to copy your backup that you just made back onto that firmware. So to load the backup is pretty straightforward. It's a text file. Double click, open it, copy, go to SLI, paste, hit enter. It should save automatically. If it doesn't, then just type save and then hit enter. Now that your firmware is up to date, you should be able to type resource, and you'll see the LED strip there. This is the address that the LED strip is attached to, B02. Plug that into Servo 1. Here's how you do that. Remember that resource and type resource Servo 1 B02. Click enter. You didn't get any errors, that's good. And now click save. And that will map Servo 1 to that resource. Now here's what you do after that. Go to configuration, enable servo tilt. Now this servos tab should appear. If this tab appears and then disappears after you save, then your firmware is not up to date. So click to that, and now you want to map servo to A6. Let's plug the drone back in with the radio powered up. And these are the channels for the radio. A6 is short for UX6. And for this example, I have UX6 mapped to this button, SE. And I have UX5 mapped to this button. Pay attention to these settings for min, mid, and max. These can change depending on the configuration for the drone. Now, here's what you need to do for the radio. Go to Inputs. This is for AUX5 and this is for AUX6. So here's where you set that up in the radio. You can call it whatever you want, it doesn't really matter, but the source does matter. Click on the source and then tap the button that you want to map it to, and that will map it to the button you just pressed. And I want this to be AUX5. So as I start to move that, you'll see it change. And then you can click enter, and then name this as whatever you want. I don't know. Let's just call it 1. And if you want to invert the direction, then change weight to -100. Alright, so this is how I have mine laid out. AUX5 is SF, which goes to this one. And AUX6 is inverted, and that goes to this one. If you want to edit, just press and hold, and then it'll give you the option to edit. And you see the weight is inverted. That is the only way to flip the input for the button. I've tried doing it in Betaflight and it doesn't seem to work. There is an option to flip the input in Betaflight, but this doesn't seem to do anything. I recommend changing this as well. For mid, whatever you have for mid, you also want to change this to that same value. That way the servo correctly reorients itself when you plug it in. For this particular setup, min and mid are both 1000 and max is 2000, and it is bound to the SE button on AUX6, and this is how it should behave. Up next is the rubber band shooter. This one's a bit more challenging. This is an all-in-one flight controller, and it will overheat very quickly if you let it sit. So the first thing you should do is set the power to 25 milliwatts, and that should help prevent it from overheating. So once that's done, then you basically want to repeat the same process. The min and max are 800. It's going to be bound to AUX6. And for the mid and min are 800, and the max is 2200. Remember, you also want to adjust the servo sensor pulse to whatever the mid is. For Crowd Surfer, this one's a bit different. You're actually going to need a battery to initialize this. You should try to unplug the DJI connector, but for this design, it's unfortunately kind of difficult. So we're just going to move as fast as possible. Plug that in.
Telemetry recovered.
And 500, 15,000, 25,000. And AUX5. That is being bound to this. And as you can see, it doesn't work because for this flywheel controller, it actually needs the battery to be plugged in order to power the servo. The moment I plug in the battery, you see the servo started moving. When you set up a servo, if it doesn't move at all when you plug it in, then you probably didn't set it up correctly. It should always go through a very quick initialization phase. For this one, you need to be careful that you screw this down at the correct position. You want to make sure that this is oriented in the right place. And here's how you do that. Plug that in.
Telemetry recovered.
And set the scroll wheel all the way to one side, and that should put the servo all the way down. If it doesn't, then what you want to do is you want to loosen this up right here and then manually reposition it to the downward facing angle. That way, when the wheel is centered, the camera is also at 0 degrees. Otherwise, the camera position is going to be very hard to predict when you're flying. And that is the process for setting up servo control on a couple different types of drones. If you enjoyed the content, then please like and subscribe, and I'll be back with full assembly videos for all of these drones.